All right. Hey, everybody out there in YouTube land. Welcome back to Smirking Gun. This is Rob. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And of course, as always, welcome back anybody who's ever been to the channel before and has decided to come back. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. All of that nonsense. Today is a special day because this is a video that I was supposed to have done over a year ago, or at least around a year ago. Yeah, a year ago. I came back from C2E2 2023, and I I came off of that on a pretty big high, and I was really ready to go back and get to making content again. I was singing in the car really loud today on the way home from work. It was one of those necessary days to roll down all your windows and blast your music and sing at the top of your lungs. So my voice is a little bit whack right now, but we're carrying on because I have to get to this. And I was singing Pearl Jam, if anybody needs to know that. And it was a live show from I want to say Chicago back in like 2001 or something like that. So anyway, because if you say something like that, like I wonder what he was singing. I was singing Pearl Jam, several albums of songs, Anyway, so about a year ago, over a year ago now, geez. After coming back from C2E2 2023, I asked my Discord group to just give me a new movie that they wanted me to review, and I'd do it. And it was I've still got one more actually to do after this. Otherwise, I'm done. But it just was one of those things where didn't want to do all of them. And I put them in like a spin so that everybody, would get their turn. But I gave up on that too. This became a real procrastination game. And if anybody knows my channel, there's procrastination, and then there's all the other stuff that deals with my anxiety and, depression and just having privacy to record. And sometimes you just don't want to do nothing. But it was for whatever reasons, like I started with Duck Soup and I didn't really want to do that one. And I need to go revisit that one just so I can be a little more fair. Or at least listen to that review again and see if I was fair enough or honest enough. Like, do I still stand by what I say by that? But over the course of time, we did get to like, I know I did 365 days, which I'll never, that piece of garbage is, and we also talked about, oh man, what else did we talk about? Game night. We did game night. We did Enola Holmes, which I was happy with that one. I was the video and the movie. But there was Fantastic Mr. Fox is still coming. Now that I've said it out loud like this, well, that hasn't stopped me before, but Fantastic Mr. Fox is the next and last one from over a year ago that I told somebody I'd do from my Discord. I have some really nice people in my Discord to put up with me, okay? And but there was one video that was asked for that was, I'm just going to say it was more special than the others that I wanted to do. I was happy to do, like all these people are my friends. And I don't want anybody to think like, less of yourselves as friends because this one is more special than the others. But this one is. It just is. And I put so much internal pressure on myself to do it this. I could have just done the movie, right? I could have just done the movie. but I got ambitious. I'm very ambitious despite my anxieties and other things that hold me back. But I took this one movie and I wanted to turn it into like a trilogy. One big giant review of this specific director's 3 movies that he had released up until that point. Or at least I thought. I realized there's another one on Netflix and something else coming. And the idea got so big, and I even watched all the movies, and I took notes for all the movies. And then it came time to record, and shit just went sideways for me. And as happens to me, I can't, like, I'm not going to get into all of that here. I'm very honest about my life. And I'm very open with my life, but everything comes, when it feels more appropriate. But like the Cliff Notes version is here. And I felt so bad. I felt like so bad. Because I'm just like, at some point, you just kind of forget. You look at your notes and you go, I don't even know what any of this shit means. Especially in the case of Murder Party. Because my notes are usually good. They're good as long as I'm about to talk about it right afterwards. A lot of times my notes are no good because they're really there just to help me not forget certain things. And that's about it. Everything else is pretty much improvised. It's like just an outline. And I'm drinking a lot of water to keep my throat from giving out on me. But my good friend, my OG YouTube original friend, my first YouTube friend, like content creator, is Darren Jakes from these reviews. This will probably, I don't know if this will be out before or after we do our Boys season 4 so far discussion, but if I somehow nail this today, what I'm trying to do, you look out for that. If you haven't seen it and it's already out, pre this, go back and look at it. I'm sure we had a good time. But Darren and I met from the Walking Dead videos that he made. And I just dug him as a person. Like, I was watching a lot of YouTubers talk about all kinds of things, but it was him and a couple of others. One was a couple of bigger channels, but like there were a couple of people out there with these really unique voices and really honest and sincere and wrote things, just really relatable people. And I just started a conversation with him. I was always in his comment section, probably annoying the hell out of him. And I was trying to make content too, and I was looking to him for a lot of advice, and he was very gracious and helped me out a lot. Like a lot. And then we started working together around my memory is failing me, but I want to say that we were working on stuff at the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm not 100% sure. Like the 6th or 7th season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Maybe before that, maybe just here and there or something like that. But we started working together a lot. Me and other people as well. And it just was really great to have him there when I was starting. Because he'd been around for a little bit, and you know, we were still kind of, you know, building our channels together. At one point, it feels like we kind of intersected. And everything that he did, he's done for me as a friend and as a content creator. Just, it made me really like look at this video and go, I can't, you know, I'm Mr. Grand Gesture. I don't know. It's a problem. So I end up just like, I even made like a thumbnail with like the idea of like it's gotten larger, trying to like buy. I was like someone who's like got a book owed to a publisher and he's just fucking off and he just can't get it done, can't get there for whatever reason. And he just starts sending shit to the person like, look, yeah, look, I swear to God, it's getting done. Very Hunter S. Thompson-y, you know? But this time, no more fucking around. I'm here to talk about 3 Jeremy Saulnier, I'm probably butchering his name, movies. The first 3 that came out, or that I'm aware of. I know there's probably like some short films and stuff like that. But we're talking about Murder Party from 2007, Blue Ruin from 2009, and the Green Room, which I think is 2014, I think. And this was originally just supposed to be a video about Green Room. And I just, yeah, like I said, I went, fuck that. I want to make this big thing for my friend who I now owe like this video for over a year. And I wanted to, you know, I had even grander plans than this, man. I wanted to meet Jeremy Saulnier online somehow and talk to him about the 3 movies and make it, I mean, really make it this big thing, like, but homemade. That's another reason why I wanted to do this, because I started looking into Jeremy Saulnier and how he did things and how he does things and how he writes and things like that, and working with all his friends. And I was like, this guy, and he's like almost exactly my age. He like just turned 48. I'm 48. I'm about to turn 49 next month. And it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, this guy is, I can't help but like go self-insert here. Like, he's doing what I wish I was doing right now at that age. You know, clearly he's 48 now. So it means that like he's been doing this for a long time, well before now. And it's not green-eyed envy. It's genuine, like, yes. Like, I'm not gonna like fantasize through his works of the what woulda, coulda, shouldas, you know, like part of why I do what I do and some of the ways I do things is for me to tell stories, even if there's somebody else's. And hopefully as I get more and more into like what I can do with film and editing myself, who knows? I've got all kinds of ideas. I've always had all kinds of ambitious ideas. It's just getting me to follow through with them has been the more difficult part. Hence this video, right? I.e. this video. Or is it E.G.? I don't know. I gotta like watch Get Shorty. I remember they explained I.E. E.G. in that a million times, a million years ago. But yeah, I really just dug Jeremy Saulnier's style. His movies are very gritty. Murder Party especially. By that I mean it was more, you know, it's under independent movie. Like, I know that there could be a lot of faces next to that definition, but this guy's movie Murder Party should definitely be in the conversation of examples of, like, in true independent film, like Homemade, We Got Our Friends Together, Cannibal the Musical, Clerks, you know, that kind of shit. And he was doing it in 2007. Murder Party doesn't look like it's from 2007. Murder Party looks like it comes from 1991, maybe even late 80s. And I don't think that that's really intentional. And I haven't, I've looked at a lot of stuff that they talk about these movies. I've looked into, and it's probably going to be parts of that in this video where I might intercut stuff and edit this more so that I can fit in and show some examples of what I'm talking about here with, like, Jeremy Saulnier's way of doing things. But it just, it looked the way it looked to me. Like, Murder Party looks the way it looks to me because that's just how, that's the budget. It's in, like, high def, but high def looking, like, it looks pretty good, you know what I mean? It's not like grainy or too much, but it just, and it's like a step above, like, shot on video, you know what I'm saying? But it still looks like something from another time, from an earlier time, something that I recognize from, like, the late 80s, early 90s way of looking at it. Everything very do-it-yourself, very shoestring budget looking. And then other times in Murder Party, it looks fantastic. Some of the makeup effects, especially on Macon Blair later in that movie, oh my gosh. But another thing I think about with his films is that I was looking for kind of a theme that runs throughout all of them. And I'm not saying this is what it is, but this is what I get from it. And that you can make all the kind of horror movies with supernatural stuff in it, slashers, you keep coming back to life, get into your dreams, urban legends come to life, unstoppable killers that just keep coming. And really, the scary stuff to me is reality. And he's making horror movies, whether he is intending to or not. And you could make a case that Blue Ruin isn't a horror movie, but to me it kind of is. And Green Room and Murder Party both feel like horror movies, but he does something different with all of it. One of which is, like, reality. These people still feel as cartoony as Murder Party can get in some ways. It still feels, after the fact, when you watch it and you think about it, some people are just this fucking weird. And with Blue Ruin, it's this very dour, bleak film that by the end of it feels like a horror movie, but not like gratuitous, like, like a Slumber Party Massacre kind of thing. You know what I mean? Because I'm thinking, if you see, when we talk about Blue Ruin, I'll get to why I mean that kind of thing. And then Green Room, I mean, a band stuck in the green room while a bunch of neo-Nazis fucking plan on murdering you outside and they've got fucking pit bulls and guns and knives, and tell me that's not a horror movie. But it's reality. All the shit that happens in these movies, right, could have, like, Murder Party, I guess would be more of an absurd film. But I've seen Stranger Things, happen where people just fucking, like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, I think, where the characters just, spoiler alert, like if you haven't seen that movie, go see that movie. Otherwise, cover your ears for like 5 seconds. But like in Tucker and Dale versus Evil, where they all like basically get themselves killed, it's kind of like that in this. But I've seen weirder things. People do stupid things that escalate. And in the situation of these people who are making a murder party and then start to find out certain things and betrayals and all that, like that's part of the horror in this too, is like these people finding out like the reality, who these people, who they all really are now that they're sitting preparing to murder someone, which should automatically make it a horror movie. I mean, so that's really all I got to say, I guess, about Jeremy Saulnier and, the lead up to all this, which is, of course, my usual stream of consciousness with notes, folks. But a lot of this, like I said, is improvised. So let's just jump in then to Murder Party from 2007, which is just, it's a movie, but I feel like it's barely a movie, other than, what I mean is like the plot's, it's a short film. It feels padded to get to a run length, like a feature length runtime. And that's what you got to do. Especially, like if you have the material, but just not quite enough to fill that runtime. You can throw some scenes in there where people are just talking or walking. Look at tons of horror movies that they talk about in like Red Letter Media, where it's just so much of it is just people walking and walking through the fucking woods or whatever. It's just what you have to do sometimes. So this film is about a guy who's just a guy. There's really no name to this guy. I think. Let me look. Okay, I was wrong. He does have a name. It's Chris S. Harp, and his real name is Chris Sharp. So, ha ha ha. But Chris is just minding his own business. It's about him that, he finds this invitation. It just says to a murder party. And we'll get into why he goes to the murder party and all that. But they're a rogue art collective. If that's even a real thing. I feel like I love that term, though. That's a great band name, Rogue Art Collective. Like a college band. Maybe a high school. That's a college band. But their whole thing is murder for art. They're all a bunch of artists. And they all think that by doing this, like they say that like they're trying to make, you're only famous after you're dead, basically, in the art world. And I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about the art world. Okay? This is just about a bunch of people who consider themselves artists, and they decide to kill somebody for art. And how it all goes terribly wrong. Because there's always like things that, the perfect plan does not go off as, without a hitch. There has to be drama for it to be a movie, right? So, and I'm trying to get the cast to pull up here. So that's what we need to get into before we start talking about the movie proper, like I always do. I love my cast. Sky Saulnier, I believe, is, she's Jeremy Saulnier's wife. And she plays Sky. We got Paul Goldblatt as Paul, Sandy Barnett as Tim Alexander, Macon Blair as Macon, William Lacey as Bill, Stacy Rock as Lexi, Bill Tangradi as Zyko, Bo Sia as Cicero, Alex Barnett as Alexander, David Zelfort, lover not fighter, Michael Komaga as the party doorman, Matt Girovino as prankster, Tim Curry, Forrest Whitaker. I don't know. Where were they in this movie? Stacey Edwards as Holly and Balthazar Getty as Julian. What? I need to it's like I almost need to rewatch this movie just by looking at this cast. I literally didn't know that. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But they're all relatively unknowns other than those people that I just mentioned. I've seen Sandy Barnett and Macon Blair has been in all of Jeremy's movies. I've also seen Bill Tangradi in a few things. And I think that's about it. Maybe Bo Sia in a few things too. I think Bo Sia I've seen in a bunch of things. But the rest of them, no. And I love that. I think that again, I've said I love, knowing a cast, but I really love not knowing a cast because then there's no any kind of preconceived notions about what the performance should be like. It's just allowed to be, and they can give this if I've never heard of them or seen them before, this is their chance to make an impression. And I love seeing new actors, man. I love it. Because then you get surprised before it becomes their thing. You get to see them do that first thing where you can see them becoming the actor that they're going to be. And that's all I'm saying. But and everybody just is like ordinary people, right? The only, I would say, supernatural thing in this film, and it's not, but it's the letter that's getting blown down the street. Who was this letter for? You know what I mean? They just put a bunch of them out apparently, and it just finds this guy who I thought was just a guy. But by the end of the movie, I realized that this guy had confrontation problems. Probably he's taking medication. He is on a very strict regimen. You can tell he looks at his watch. He takes his pills several times in the movie. And it didn't really kick in until I realized, I think most of the way through watching it, I think I've watched this movie 3 times in the year. So there is some things I'm just trying to recall. But I felt like by the end of watching it this time, I was like, this is a guy who doesn't do confrontation. And then ends up in this huge confrontational situation where it's you have no choice. It is escape or kill or be killed. And as serious as I make that sound, because he is in a serious situation, it's how it's played, very satirical almost of the art scene. And maybe it is a satire, satirical horror. I don't know how many, is that that's probably a genre that doesn't have a lot of films in it. But, and they're all probably really good. But we see something that made me realize this was how he acted at the beginning of the movie, how he ended up going to the party in the first place. He picks up the letter, but he has no intention of going. He's got a bunch of videotapes. He's getting some food. He's got the candy ready. He's going to sit down and has to have a whole night of Halloween movies. Except for one problem. His cat's in his chair. And they have a staring contest. And he won't even he won't say, "Get out of my chair." He literally can't stand up to his cat, so that he just, rather than just do something about it, he decides to go to the party instead. He just erases his entire night because he couldn't even make his cat move. And so by the end of this film, I love that we see that arc actually get realized. And as silly as it is, you can get so much from that ending now. The beginning and what this guy's about and how he is different, because we know very little about him. And so the way that we get to reveal, like to see his arc play out and in front of us go, oh shit, like it all goes full circle. Where after everything, because I mean, if you haven't seen this, this is for people who have seen this, and this is a celebration of Jeremy Saulnier's movies. Like he goes home, he's covered in blood. He's still wearing his costume. He's still wearing his costume when he's like getting food and everything, and he just sits. He goes over to the cat. He looks at the cat. The cat's looking at him, and there's just this like standoff where the cat fucks off. He's looking at him, and I'm, the cat doesn't know what blood is. Maybe it probably smells what blood is, right? But like why does my master smell really delicious? But the cat, he relents, and it's like this sign of like showing the alpha, I guess. They like not in that toxic way, but like standing up for himself. You know what I mean? He stood his ground with the cat. Now that he's survived this thing, he can come home now and not have his night ruined by his cat. But it's not just that. It's saying like this guy had a lot of like issues probably with confrontation at the very least, and rose above him. And fucking like now he's like a different man, maybe a better man. And will this ever come back on him? I don't know, right? Like and that's what is also fine about this. Is one of his neighbors, he's walking down the street with these clothes that are just completely bloody, but one of his neighbors at least sees him. But what the fuck, it's it's Halloween, right? So I know that like I'm not following, scene by scene. I'm spoiling that, but I really wanted to talk about that because I was so pleased with myself. And I have the original notes, and then I took more notes. So it's like I have two different ways of looking at this thing. I even wrote like, I bet you like, and when I talked about Jeremy's like movie making style and everything, and that they look the way they look, and I'm thinking to myself like, this is probably what my first movie would look like. And I'm like, if my first movie looked like this, I'd love it. I would love it. I mean, everybody wants their movie to look like, some kind of cinematic masterpiece, but it's just, that's not everybody just gets to have that fall in their lap. Especially if you don't go to film school. I also really like that, speaking of, I love big spectacles just as much as anybody else, like Mad Max Fury Road, that kind of thing. But one of the things I love is things that look authentic. And small budget movies, man, can be some of the most satisfying real experiences, because you just, I don't know, it's that you feel like you're there kind of thing. Also, I wanted to figure out like, why does he make the pumpkin bread pie, right? It's pumpkin bread, pumpkin raisin. And I'm like, why is he doing that? And again, it all explains like he can't come empty-handed to this party that he doesn't know anything about. Like what is expected of him. So he's just throwing together like whatever he has. I love that he goes through his costumes and he puts the costumes away just so he can get at the cardboard. Like how a baby, they always say babies will play with the box more than the toy. I felt like that was very hilarious that he makes his own costume, and he's a knight, and he's like out on a journey. So now it really is kind of like when you look at the movie after the fact, like the hero's journey. Like we don't know, he doesn't feel like a hero at first. He's letting his cat run his life. But he goes out, he's going out, and we know that like he's going out to be murdered. He just doesn't know it. And but he's on a journey now, and he's dressed like a knight. And I think that that's just really great. And he's like, as he's in his own neighborhood, like he's confident. But that as soon as he gets on like the train and he's in the city and you got that guy like looking at him, right? I feel like that was a real person, man. I feel like that was a real moment. If that's written, amazing. Because that guy felt like he wasn't acting on the train. So he gets there, and this is a movie that escalates like immediately. Because even though one of them just sits there playing his PSP, which I thought was great, 2007 PSP, I remember sitting at the bar I worked at, playing my PSP back then. Oh yeah, Christopher S. Hawley, that's his name, not Harp. Anyway, he's at a literal murder party. They can't believe anybody showed up. Lexi's dressed up like she's Prue. Is that her name? Daryl Hannah from Blade Runner. And Bill's dressed up like I think he's out of the fucking Warriors or something like that. They're all like dressed up. Macon's got like a Wolfman like mask on, and they're all there to have a murder party. They tie him up, right? He they tie this poor guy up, and it's they immediately start dying themselves, and it just starts to fall apart practically right away because of how they handle it, and I love it. It's like they take the bread from him. It's like, oh, that's so nice. Let's tie him up now, and we're gonna kill him. We're gonna do whatever to him. And the girl that eats the bread is allergic, falls over, fucking hits her head and dies. And this is Jeremy Saulnier's wife. She just dies. She's sitting there talking about the raisins, and then just she's up and talking too with the head wound, which is just again like very real and so disturbing. Even though like it should feel low budget. It should feel like I thought that the way it was filmed and the location and everything and the way it was shot would take me out of it, but it didn't at all. Again, the makeup effects were really good, and the way that she went down and hit, all of that just felt really real. So as cartoony as these people act, the repercussions of their cartoony actions have very real consequences. It's like if, the train really does run over Wile E. Coyote. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and he doesn't just get up and spring back or whatever. Or the Roadrunner doesn't just run through the tunnel and he goes smashing into it, and just hits the wall. It's like they didn't realize, anything like this was going to happen. So they blame him for her death, even though she just fell and hit her head. They cover it up. They put her in a freezer, not even like they put her in. I don't even know if it was a working freezer, right? It was probably not. It was just one of those that you open up and you put the body in, like in a mobster movie, right? And they just dump her in there and start trying to figure out like how the guy that they're waiting for is going to handle it. And it's so amateur, but this is like, I don't know. It still feels like they're really in this. They're also really high on cocaine and shit. So it's not like they're acting normal as it is. I mean, you got Macon in this, Macon Blair, who again is in all of Saulnier's movies. He goes outside, like he's in love with Lexi. She's not in love with him. He's basically only there for her. And he's been, after they cover up her death, he's kind of just drinking and drenching himself literally in alcohol. Like they're all kind of spiraling out in different ways. And Macon like goes outside with the mask on, puts a cigarette in his mouth, and he's talking to the dog. And you know that he's about to say something like possibly significant. And he's like, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, and I'm just going to say it in front of a dog. And he goes to light the cigarette, and he just lights up on fucking fire. And the fire extinguishers don't work. And then you have Alexander, who enters the fray. He's this guy who they're all trying to impress because he has money, like grant money for their art. And he's holding it over their heads. He's lording it over him. They all worship this guy. And they've set he's like set all this up, and they're the ones who have come through. He's the one who wanted a murder party, and he's basically trying, whoever can do the best will get the money. And he's watching them dance. And you're like, as soon as you meet this guy, you're like, this fucking guy? But it's all about the money. And he's in like the right circles. And I love that this guy is complete fucking fraud. And that he's just, what does he say? He's he works at a restaurant. I didn't write it down, but he just works at a restaurant. He's like a bellhop or some crap like that. I can't remember. And after they find that out, I mean, it's just even more betrayal after betrayal where they all just start turning on each other. And I mean, like Paul has this big problem with Alexander. And I mean, they're trying to shoot photos, and all of a sudden, like Alexander just has his drug dealer buddy shoot Paul and kill him. I mean, and it's one of those things where he's like shot and he's like still talking and he just keeps getting shot. And it's like, I know that they're going for laughs, but I was just sitting there with my mouth open like, oh my fucking God, this guy won't just die. And he shoots Paul. He shoots the French assistant that came there to help Paul with the shooting of, like, he wanted to photograph the murder party victim here in the picture, Christopher. And it's after they find Sky that this all goes nuts. Because they all start trying to go like, well, what? Making excuses. Oh, he's a fry cook. And his plan all along, sorry, when he finds Sky, my notes, like I said, they're only good for about 24 hours. And then we realized that he was planning on having them all killed because, as he says, like, you're not famous in the art world until you're already dead. And this guy's he's just a weird sociopath who ends up getting like his face. The dog eats drugs, eats a whole bunch of cocaine, and then like eats Alexander's face off. Macon, who ends up finally getting put out, is melted to the freaking werewolf costumes mask. So that he looks like a melted werewolf. And he looks like he's in a lot of pain. And Zyko gets the guy that's the drug dealer. He's trying to kill Lexi. He gets chainsawed by Macon. And then Tim, who's after he's attacked by the dog, he's beaten to death by Bill, who then axes Lexi who's trying to free Chris at the end. Lexi's the only one who's like trying to get him out of there. Like, this is all gone to shit. We all got to get out of here. We're all killing each other. Alec, it just goes nuts. And then Chris gets loose after Lexi gets axed, and he goes on the run, and Bill's after him, and Macon's after him, carrying the chainsaw with the extension cord, trying to find somewhere to plug it in so that he can then chainsaw the person that he's trying to chainsaw Bill for killing Lexi. There's a lot to write down. Okay, so the main character stops to take a whiz. And I'm like, he can't just go in his. I'm sorry, but if I'm being chased by a murderer, I'm just going, man. I'm just going. But it did have, this was a genuine like comedic moment, because you know that like the guy's gonna come through the door while his dick's out. Although I think it might even have been funnier if he was like, he finishes and zips up and then just kind of thinks that it's all okay, and then he comes through the door. But that's, you know, I'm not going to rewrite the guy's script. I'm just saying. The longest extension cord. So Macon finds a way to plug in, but then he falls off the fucking roof. And Bill follows Chris into this art scene where Bill is actually almost talked out of all of this, it seems. This guy who's like, they all find out that this was all bullshit, but one of the guys is genuinely interested in Bill's art and him becoming like something. And then after he brings up Alexander and shit, he just goes back off, goes over to try to kill Chris. That's when Chris grabs the chainsaw that fell, it was still hanging from the roof that Macon had fallen off with. He grabs the chainsaw through the window and then chainsaws Bill through the face in a just an insanely long amount of time to not cut through somebody's head, but have somebody screaming in bloody murder. After Bill kills, before that though, Bill kills every single person in the room, just rips them, beats them apart. Just, it's insane. And nobody does anything. In fact, they all, like, anybody that walks over to it and sees all the bodies, basically they look at it like, oh, this is the show, it started already. Like, they don't even know that it's real. And Chris walks out and grabs this guy's phone, dials 911 and says, it's real, and then throws his pills away. So, I mean, I'm not going to go over I didn't go over every little moment and every little scene. I'm not going to sit there and talk about what they were talking about when they all took drugs and were telling the truth. They did take truth serum, and it was pretty awesome. It's one of the best. It's like how everything really starts to fall apart is when they start telling each other the truth. But I mean, one of the things that brings up to me is like how quickly self-preservation mode comes out. Like when Sky dies, they just cover it up immediately. They don't even try to like think about a way to like, how are we, how to like go, okay, we got to take her into the, maybe she's not dead, like maybe they could have saved her life or whatever. But, and when Alexander's like, why are we doing this here? And he starts talking about changing neighborhoods. Like, this is basically it. Like, he's kind of predicting like all the cleanups of the neighborhoods where these kind of places just don't exist in certain areas anymore. I know that some people don't like when that happens to their areas. South Park made a whole fucking season about it. But he's basically like saying this is the time to kill people, is right before we're about to become something else, and no one will even know. They'll just, it'll just get buried, because otherwise, if this were to come out, right, they would ruin the whole thing. Like people wouldn't want to like make changes to a neighborhood where people are all murdered. Um, and I think that's about it. I wanted to, other than I guess they said that they were going to kick, um, they were going to kick Bill out of the collective because he's really talented and we're insecure. Now, when I go to, oh, yeah, this line, Lexi telling him why. And she's like, we're kicking you out of the collective because you are really talented and we are insecure. Now, when I go to a good movie or exhibit, I hate it. I just want everything to be bad because when something is good, there is no room for me. That is one of the coolest, like just showing like how they under truth serum, how like just absolutely shallow and self-serving and narcissistic they all are. That everything is about them. And I don't know if that's like I mean, I think that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And so that's Murder Party, folks. I've already talked for a million years, and imagine how long we're going to talk about Blue Ruin and Green Room. Actually, it's not going to be as long because I've gotten a lot of the other stuff away. But so, without further ado, let's get to talking about Blue Ruin. Okay, so now we get to the second movie in this little trilogy, Blue Ruin, which couldn't be any more different from Murder Party, as Green Room is from Blue Ruin. There's a progression here that I love seeing from an up and coming director at the time. Now, I mean, I know that like these movies now basically are old to a lot of people, which is sad knowing that like 2016 was like 8 years ago, and Anton Yelchin's been gone that whole time. It's been 8 years since Anton's been gone. That's crazy to me. But and Blue Ruin feels like a way older movie than even Murder Party. I don't even know why. Maybe it's just because I didn't know about Murder Party until more recently. But Blue Ruin is going to be, we're going to be talking about this a lot different than we are Murder Party, because the absurdism of Murder Party is nothing compared to this like really stark, stripped down, bleak world of Blue Ruin. Very simple plot on the surface until you start getting into the subtext and the layers and the people involved and why everything is happening. And it's still simple, but a whole lot of destruction comes from like this simple thing that happens that gets like more complicated as the deeper that you look, even though even that's the deeper you go, the simplicity is still there, the reasons are still there, and the reasons people hurt each other are pretty simple still as well. But there's no silliness in this movie. There's nothing to like laugh at, even like like if you think like something might be a little awkward or not or everything. No. And like I said, I like his movies because even though Murder Party is absurd, there is some like really stark realism to it. And Blue Ruin goes all in on stark reality. He's been interviewed and people have talked about the inept characters, people doing things that are pretty inept, and it's like that's not the really right word. They're just people doing things like regular ass people don't know how, like your average Joe isn't some trained killer, so that when it's time to get revenge for what somebody did to you, you don't suddenly just know how to do things, or things just suddenly just work out for you like for an action hero. But most movies like that aren't built like this, aren't dramatic like this, aren't taken so seriously as this. This is taking stuff that really happens and showing the ugliness of it. And this isn't Hollywood, and people that do these things that go on revenge kicks, they're just regular people and they make mistakes, and It's never pretty. It's like thinking about what you're going to do if you got to fight somebody, right? It's, you could say that, oh, okay, I know this guy is got this much height on me or this much weight on me, or they know how to fight like this for some reason. I know that, or this advantage or this disadvantage. You can think all the things you want until it's time to actually fight. And then when it actually goes down, it's like nothing usually that would be in your head. In extreme situations, it's chaos, like, and anything can happen. Even if the odds might be in someone's favor, doesn't mean that it'll all go down exactly the same way. You might get the same result, but just, a big guy might beat a small guy most of the time, but then all of a sudden something might happen that changes like that. You never know. And it's just how, like, reality. So when you see people like that, like characters like that are in Blue Ruin, like Dwight, played by Macon Blair, who is so good in this. Everybody's really good in this. There's not a lot of meaty roles for anybody but Macon in this. You just have some really believable performances, whether it's Teddy that he takes in the car, because it's in spoilers again for everybody. Watch the movies and come back, and if you can't get through the movies because they're too much for you, then just come and listen to what I have to say about them, I guess. Whether it's like Teddy in the trunk of the car, or his sister, who's actually been in a bunch of stuff. Is it Hargreaves? Amy Hargreaves, yeah, who I think she was Claire Danes' sister on Homeland. And yeah, I mean, Eve Plum is in this very, very, very briefly. Like, she's in a scene where you can't tell it's her early on in the movie, and then she's at the end, and you're just kind of like, huh, that's Eve Plum. I wouldn't have known that was Eve Plum unless I looked at the IMDb credits. The one person that's in this that I did recognize outright was the one who was oh gosh, Devin Rattray from Home Alone. And look, this movie was made in back in the day already, in the 2010s, early 2010s, and since then, if you Google that guy, you're going to find some pretty disturbing stuff. I'm not going to get into it here. When I hear about the things from today, though, and I see his performance in this movie, and even though you should be, you have to separate the artist from the art. There's like, now it's just like, oh, when you watch what the character does in the movie, you almost feel like, well, I wonder how hard he had to act to get this role done right. Even though he's more of a military gun guy, but in real life he was involved in some pretty heinous stuff about women. Because of course, these guys. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that, but I'm just saying, because I really was like looking forward to talking about like stuff, and as I dug into the cast, it's like just another person you find is a pretty bad person. But didn't hurt his performance, unfortunately. But this movie is about, to me, trauma, and how, I mean, you could say one lie, one secret found out, ruined two whole families, basically got everybody killed, as many as possible, over a secret that is pretty benign to me. I mean, when you look at, why people hurt each other and things that are pretty commonplace, people cheating on each other, but like the right group of people or the wrong group of people, so again, this is for people who have seen all this, so I don't mind. I should just say, I mean, it's like, so this guy named Big Wade, has a family, whole bunch of them, and a long time ago, a guy named Lil Wade, basically, the son of Big Wade, kills Dwight's mother and father because Dwight's father was having an affair with Big Wade's wife. And so Big Wade, dying of cancer, we find out, kills Dwight's mom and dad. And it ruins their it ruins Dwight. He has a sister who, ends up having a family. He is estranged from them. She's at least tried to move on, and who knows, we don't really go into her character's background as far as what it has done to her, but I'm sure it's not been fun. But we see this movie from the perspective of Dwight, who's been destroyed by this. And he's a drifter. And he's living out of his car. He's a known homeless person, basically. Like he parks his car somewhere out of the way where nobody sees him. He gets out of dumpsters. He eats, and he's far enough away from like where his sister is that he's just off the grid, and it's just a really sad, awful existence where he's the kind of guy who has to sneak in and break in. He breaks into people's houses to take baths, not to hurt anybody or whatever. But it's still like I'm not trying to make excuses for it either. Like it's just he doesn't know how to live in this world. And he's just, I don't even know how he's going on in life. And he's brought in by the cops one day and he's told, everything's fine. You're going to be fine. But the killer of your family is going to be released. And we wanted you to know about this now. We wanted you to hear about it so that, you can kind of mentally prepare yourself for it, whatnot. And it's the rest of the movie is him trying to, he goes to kill the man who killed his parents, and how it gets all out of control and spirals out from there to where we end up with this kind of big end finish to the family that took him out, but also like it's an ending for him too. It talks, it's a movie about also about just this ongoing hate that people have for each other that goes on until it spreads to the rest of the family and continues. And we there's these old stories now of like feuding families that were a lot like that people knew a lot more about back in not even that long ago. But like if you talk about the Hatfields and McCoys, and they'd make a TV movie about it, and that's how people remember now. And these days, the last few decades, people that just had a hate on for each other. You could talk about the Romeo and Juliet's families, the Capulets and the, I don't know, what is it, the Romulans? I don't know. I just realized I used to know both of those family names, but they're kind of gone. So I know the Capulets is one of them, but you know what I mean? Like people that are just out to kill each other. Why? Because somebody did something to somebody a long time ago, and now everybody's just out to get everybody. Except in the case of because we don't know about Dwight's family's background. We just know that the Big Wade family is a criminal family. So we don't know how honest Dwight's family is either, how he knew Big Wade's wife to have an affair with her in the first place, that kind of thing. Is it just, kismet, circumstance, fate, whatever bullshit, just two people finding each other and being like, I want to be bumping uglies with you, Jan Brady. And how it all just destroys everybody, just about. And the more I've seen this movie, and every time I watch it, it brings it all up. And maybe that was one of the reasons why I was having a hard time talking about the movie, period, was just like that trauma that we have. And I'm talking about this part, this kind, angle of the film, because I know that like trauma, relived trauma, not getting over trauma, letting it destroy your life. I mean, it's a story that encompasses every corner of the globe. Whether it's somebody whose family was destroyed in war, or in something like what happens in this movie, or a drunk driving accident, or family member kills another family, whatever your flavor of trauma. All right, because it could be anything. You could be involved in an accident that hurts other people around you, but not you. That kind of thing. Whatever flavor of trauma you have, it can destroy you, and it's just something that hits home for me because I feel like I've had these compounding traumas throughout my life that have never been dealt with. And every time something happens, I feel like it doesn't there's not a lot of subtraction of trauma in my life that I don't relive. There's a lot more of reliving trauma than it's like every once in a while I might figure out something that lessens or gets rid of something that has happened to me. And there's usually something that comes around the next corner. And I feel like it's one of those things where if you don't heal, you can end up in a situation like Dwight. You could end up spiraling out because you're like, how did he end up the way he ended up? How did he end up in the car, in a dumpster, like eating dumpster food? He sounds like he was all right, in high school. It sounds like he had friends. It sounds, what I mean, like potential, all that potential gone. It's one of the things that like films like this give you, that like opportunity to go down those, like ask those questions and never have them answered, but they're really fun to ask, of like, what was this downward spiral like for him? Because I see my own like situation. And so again, one of the ways we watch things, when we sit there and it affects us, it makes us think about what has happened to us. We're looking to attach to things. We're not, look, some people just love to go to the movies and sit there and watch blockbuster movies and eat their popcorn, and that's fine. That's great. Good, great, grand. Right? I'm happy for you. And then there's the rest. There's other people who like that too, or maybe don't like that. Maybe they just prefer these kind of films that make them, they want to connect to something. They want to find something relatable to the film, and or whether maybe they don't even know it. You go into watching Blue Ruin and you all of a sudden you're sitting there practically in tears in your seat because it's making you think about things in your own life. And that's, if you know my channel by now, that's what we do all the time. And this movie has me thinking about like how I've been a little bit like Dwight. I used to be called the Drifter. I had a full-time job and I still was called the Drifter. Like this guy who just goes around, like is just around. It doesn't really have like any kind of solid, anything that felt like solid for me as far as the life goes back then. This is probably around, between the years of like 2004 and like 2009 or 10, where I really like, that was a nickname that was hard to get rid of. And there's a person out there that still, like the last time I saw that person not too long ago, and they said it. They didn't even say my name. They just said Drifter. And it just like, it just makes you feel like, God, like, this is how people see you. Like, this is who you like are to a community. And I saw like how, like, I've been around this area now for a lot longer than I care to admit. And people remember things. And it's like your trauma, how you present yourself. Like I can see myself reflected, like as people can see you. They don't understand your situation. They're not trying to understand your situation. And to them, I feel like there are times when I look like somebody like Dwight. I don't mean physically, where I've got an unkempt beard and hair completely, just like disheveled and living out of my car, even though, who doesn't live out of their car these days? Forever. I think people have been living out of their cars forever. But I see those like, I see that like ways that I can't believe I didn't fall. Like I can see now after like watching this movie how close to the edge I was of being that guy. I slept on couches. I stayed at people's houses. I was taken care of by other families. I was always moving around and around. And this is before, like, and the people who called me Drifter didn't even know that for the longest time, I was like, a couch surfer. And it's one of the things that was hard for me when I was transitioning out of my last living situation to get back on my feet and like get away from the toxic person I was around. I ended up, I'm back, ended up back on a couch. And even though it's not couch surfing or anything, it just still brought back that kind of feeling of like, this is how close to the edge you can be to not having anything, to being like someone like Dwight. That all it would take is a bit more of a mental breakdown in some aspect of my life where I would just end up like that in a situation where you just like go, why would you even want to be alive still? What drives you when you get to that point in your life where that's where your life is? And you see people every day, especially if you live in big cities, but even smaller cities, like we are seeing these people that we don't know their stories, right? And we see signs that say, hey, I need money to get back to such and such, and we get mad at them, and we're like, why'd you even come here or whatever, like we see homeless people and we get mad. I think we get mad because it's like we don't like to see that side of our society where these people were just like us, and then something happened, and then maybe something else happened in a series of events, and now that person's standing on the side of the road, and we don't like being reminded of that. And so it's messed up. It's messed up. And understanding mental illness, understanding trauma, understanding and having empathy for each other, like there just seems to be like all this like faux empathy, and forget thoughts and prayers and all that shit, because that was laughable a million years ago. But like the real empathy that we supposedly have whenever we like, and these days it's getting that the distance between those time periods where I felt like we had empathy for each other is growing and growing and growing, and there's a distance in that. But there used to be a time, not even, it doesn't feel that long ago, where the empathy that we had for each other at least felt more real than it does now. Now it's just laughable to me. Now it's just dog eat dog. Who gives a fuck about the people that are suffering trauma? We're all suffering, so fuck you, get over it. But I think a movie like this reminds us that we're all close to the edge. All it takes is one thing to happen, and you can be in the situation like some of these people. Now, I mean, like in Green Room, if you're not a punk band, you're not a band at all, you don't end up in green rooms, you're less likely to run into a scenario in like that film. But in Blue Ruin, this is completely about like human behavior. One person fell in love with someone else that wasn't theirs to fall in love with, as far as like, man and a woman, wife, man, wife is my property, and a man slept with her, so I kill his family. That kind of mentality. I mean, I hate to say, but it's everywhere too. Back then, I mean, how often would we, like, when you see a story like this in 2013, even, we go, man, that's an extreme. Now in 2024, it's like you hear stories about these kind of people every day. They've crawled out of the woodwork, and we're hearing about the horrible things that people do to each other more and more every single day. I'm not saying things weren't happening that weren't happening back then that are happening now, but it's just like you turn your head and it's just some other person doing something completely awful to somebody else, and it seems to be less and less consequences for anything that anybody does to anybody. If you're wondering why I'm not talking about this movie yet, it's because I am talking about this movie. I am just talking about how it makes me feel, and this is where it goes with me. And especially with like when he sees his sister, right? He after I mean, we'll get to the events, but it's like that was another thing that really hit me was when I've been in bad situations before and I haven't seen family members in a while. I've been, and part of it was just like initially when I first left the cult that I was in, and I had family that were still in it. They're not, my sisters are no longer in it. Yeah, that's the family I'm talking about. But at the time they were. And so seeing them was not something that really felt like it was on the table. And so I didn't see my sisters for a little while. And when they first saw me, I was doing okay. But then even more time went by and I hadn't seen either of them. And the next time I saw one of my sisters, it was like two strangers. In fact, it almost felt like when she saw me, she was like, oh man, of all the people to run into, I had to run into you. And then the next time I saw one of my sisters, it was at they were at a different place in their lives, and they were more open to say hi to me. And they when they saw that I was the situation that I was in, they went to help me. And it's that like they keep seeing me. My sisters have had to keep seeing me in some form of distress over the course of our lives. There's been less time in the last 30 years of them seeing me successful in life than in distress. And in the scenes with him and his sister, that was really hard for me to watch, because it's like, do you want money? No. Do you need this? No. I mean, then the conversation's not going to suddenly turn into I killed the guy who killed mom and dad. But it's that like, I can't get it together. I wish I could get it together. That shame that you feel, that awfulness you feel of like, I wish I was over all these things. It's just, it hits me where I live. When he finds out that, she has kids now, and it's like, but after so long and in the situation that he's in, or like how I was in, did those people, like, did my sister want me around her own kids? Same as like, she would look and go, do I even want this guy around my kids? It's my brother. How can I say this? Except it was probably smart, it would be probably smart to be leery of that person, as much as it hurts. And, it takes somebody with real self-awareness to like see that situation. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of self-awareness around that situation. I just felt hurt. And so, and I made a lot of dumb mistakes like this guy does. And, and just in general, where you think you're doing something smart and it just snowballs, or you make one mistake and it just spirals out until it's like, holy shit, how did I end up here? And hopefully my story doesn't end the way his does. Shot with an Uzi, dying in another family's home, taking them all out because they did me in and are threatening the rest of my family that are still alive. So we go swing all the way back around to where he goes after the original guy that he thinks killed his family, his mother and father, Wade, who's just getting out of prison, and how he follows them. And it's like kind of surprising, because I thought this was going to be one of those movies where the characters, don't do anything till the end of the movie. And then there's like the maybe we take each other out moment of the guy he's trying to kill. But instead, like, he follows them to a bar. They're driving like, and they got this like real cheesy like white limousine that I just go, oh my gosh, that is so like this. I love when things like that are thrown in there. I don't know why there's a white limo in there. It could be just that maybe they didn't know. Maybe that's just the car. Was it a choice to write white limo in the car in the script? Because it just feels like something that family would have. This like wannabe gangster trash family, that crime family, that like lives out in the woods, but we got ourselves a white limo, y'all. But they take this way to a bar, like just out of prison. I'm sure that they, it's like standard prison stuff. How many bars are probably not that far from any prison for the guys who get out, like that first time, having a drink or a prostitute, like they brought it up, like we should have had a prostitute for you. But instead of, like I said, instead of waiting until the end of the movie, he goes into the bar, he sneaks in. And I love these tense scenes because it feels like it feels so real following this guy around. It feels like documentary and like Man Bites Dog, but without a camera crew. You know what I mean? We're just literally a fly on the wall watching this guy go into a place. Nobody notices him, goes into a bathroom, hides in there, and there comes Wade. And it's like, oh my God, he's killing him right now. And it is like when we say, people will say, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, I know he doesn't know what he's doing. He's there to kill him. The idea is there, but then when you're faced with doing it, what happens? Yeah, he stabs him in the neck, but the guy's huge and he picks him up and he's slamming him against the wall. And it's not till he just quickly stabs him in the fucking side of the head and he goes down basically dead. And it's like, holy shit, it's over. He killed him. Now what? There's still a whole bunch of movie left. So now it's about getting out of there. He did what he did. He's still alive. What next? And then we get this like series of events that just spirals out to where we find out more and more about, like, because at this point, he thinks he's killed his parents' killer. But when he leaves, and he tries to stab the limousine, he stabs the tire, and it shows how hard it is to do that. In movies, they just show people fucking stabbing tires left and right. And I'm sure there are people that can do that, no problem. But your average person who sees that and thinks this is a good idea, he cuts his fucking hand, like slices it deep, just stabbing a fucking tire. Which I imagine was like when he went to puncture it, his hand hit it and then slid down the blade because the force of it forced his hand over the blade just to get it into the fucking tire. So all these like things that we see and do, like, I'm going to slash the tires, good luck. It's not always that simple. And so, but then he finds out he left his keys on the floor. So he has to leave his Blue Ruin to steal their limo, and then finds out that there's a kid in the back seat. And the kid tells him after they stop, and he lets him go and run away. Says, I don't think Big Wade killed your dad. And it kind of all of a sudden opens up this new wrinkle for Dwight. And I don't want to forget to mention before he settles on just stabbing him with a knife that he gets from the kitchen of the bar, or like the whatever they're at. He steals a gun from like outside a bar, which is not, again, it really felt like he was just ripping off cars. It just felt so authentic, man. Just the way it would look of like how, because they Hollywoodize everything. But this guy sneaking around out the bar, you can just hear like, hey man, I think there's somebody outside like snooping around in cars. Like I've been in that situation where it's like, hey man, get out there. Somebody's fucking around in the parking lot. Like he steals the gun, but then he finds the lock on the gun and ends up destroying the gun just trying to get the lock off. I just like, damn. Again, like I said, it's like simple things like, oh, it should be easy just to have a gun and I shoot somebody. And he's like, he was covered in blood too when he left just after stabbing Wade. And once again, he breaks into a home, cleans himself up, and he's watching the news, man, ready to see all this go down, but nothing happens. He sees nothing on the news. He gets a ride from a trucker. He's just trying to stay off the grid again. And he realizes that the car that he left behind, the address, would lead them to his sister. It's under that old family address. The car's that been in the family for that long. He's had the car for that long. He's never had to change it. an address because he doesn't have one. So he goes to visit his sister, who he sends a postcard, like, and it shows how, like, to this guy's mental state. He sends a postcard in the mail telling her he's coming, and then, like, with some information. But then he gets there, he's like, where did you get the postcard? And she's like, it doesn't work that fast, dude. Like, you literally just came here. It's going to be like a couple of days. Like, he, in the state that he was in, he was not thinking about that. And so that's when he gets the whole conversation where he talks to his sister, but it's all really leading to, they never called the cops. That means they're coming for me, which means, or you, and they know where you live. So he has to tell her to get out of the house. There's also the moment where he tells her, and they can't get the babysitter to answer. And that, like every time it's like, I know nothing's wrong. I've seen this movie now 3 or 4 times, and I know nothing's wrong. But whenever that happens and they're heading to the house to find out if anything happened to the kids, I still have this, like, lump in my throat, as if somehow this time the kids aren't going to be all right. But it's that the way that they set up all the tension and all the believable scenes that where you're just like, it's like when you're sitting around and something occurs to you that you're like, and you're just, when you realize that the worst hasn't happened, and you have that moment of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then the anger you feel because you felt that you were, like, in a position where that might have been a possibility. So it makes complete sense. You know, she turns on her brother, like, how, like, you killed this guy. Like, she was happy to find out he's dead. She's happy that, you know, if he had suffered. But then the reality sets in of all those, like, hard feelings, right? Is that these people are now coming for you. This was done, and now your lives are all in danger. And she's right, but she does leave. And I also wanted to quickly bring up that when they were having their conversation in the restaurant, and they're just talking about how he killed the guy, and suddenly there's this guy asking for their ketchup. And it's like, holy shit, like, this person who clearly sees that they're in, like, this, like, certain kind of, like, conversation, and he's turns, and it speaks to me. It speaks to people again. You know, I don't got no ketchup on my table, you got some on yours. And it's just like, I know the guy, like, didn't mean anything by it, but it's like in those moments where you're just like, shut the fuck up and mind your own goddamn business. But, like, you have to keep it together. I don't know. But she says that she'd forgive him for doing this if you were crazy, but you're not. You're weak. And I thought about that too. Like, the strength that it takes, like, all of us, to stay on an even keel sometimes. And that it's hard to realize how many of us are doing that we're all just trying to push through, so that when one of us, you know, when somebody loses their cool, people, it's hard not to have sometimes main character syndrome, where you forget that your actions are actually being paid attention to, and how they affect other people. And it's really like, as soon as you do that, like, it does mean that you lost your fight, your strength in the situation that you were fighting. And people really, when she calls him weak, it's like every one of us is trying not to be weak. And I think of the strength that it takes most of us to not do what Dwight did. And I don't mean, like, again, that we're all just, like, holding back from doing some bodily harm to another person. What I mean is, like, maintaining the illusion that everything is fine and staying strong for whatever purpose, family, job, what have you. And then as soon as you do that, you're called weak. And it's a moment of weakness that causes a bunch of problems, right? But still, I don't know. I love that know that they're in a neighborhood and they can't just start shooting it up. So the people that are watching the house that end up coming into the house, they're like shooting arrows. They know that like this has to be quiet. They know they can't just like, if they do this and they start firing it up, people will start looking into this more. And he gets hit in the leg with an arrow after he runs one of them over, which turns out to be the older brother of Wade, Teddy. And again, the do-it-yourself removal of the arrow, where it just him not knowing what he's doing. He's trying, we step by step, he's at the hardware store buying this and that and putting the arrow in the door and sawing it off and trying to yank it out and just finally going, I got to go to the goddamn hospital no matter what. Like being just like, I'm going to die. I have to go to the hospital. Fuck it. But then immediately, as soon as he's patched up, he's just out the door. And, it's just he had an arrow in him. So I guess they didn't need to like question whether or not like he was a criminal or anything, because he might be cuffed to the, like a lot of movies do, where the guy's got to figure out how to uncuff himself from the bed because the cops have questions. But he didn't. He just gets up and runs. And he goes back home though, and he throws out his box of stuff. And there's like, there was a scene where he's like in his house looking around in the crawl space, going through, looking at pictures and things. And when he comes back and he throws out the box of his stuff, I felt like it was him trying to erase himself. Like, I caused all this, my memory, like mom and dad are dead. My sister's trying to live. And here I am, like, keeping this going. Like, I'm part of the problem. Like, it almost as if I'm too damaged. It's too late. This has gone too far already. And it has in a lot of ways. And him just being like putting that stuff in the trash is like removing himself from like the world, from history, from the only people that are going to remember him is like his, a couple of people. And it's not going to be good, but it's also one of those stories that people will treat more like legend after a while. That guy who, took out the whole, well, I mean, he's probably more famous now in this world, in that world, like depending on how the news covered it. But up until that moment, like him dying would just be, gone. And I think he wants to be forgotten. And that's a really, really, really sad thing to get to in your life. There is a punk club in this, which again made me like go, okay, it's a little green room foreshadowing. This was also before I realized and found out that Saulnier was in a punk band, which again gives him cred for green room, writing what you know. But he meets Devin Ratray's character, who's an old friend from school who's got a lot of guns and he's clearly got some skill, and who's killed 2 people on purpose. Now, whether that was in military, I think that's what they're alluding to, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I don't know. But he's got the guy in the trunk. So he takes him out there to his friend, blah, blah, blah. He gets a gun, opens the trunk. I did think that was pretty funny. He knocks on the trunk and the guy just starts swearing, like every kind of thing that you would say. The extreme anger to the, I can get you a gun, man. I can help you out, to just, again, the other extremes. I'll fucking kill, like the all over the place feeling of being in the trunk, which I can say that I have spent more time in the trunk of a car than I would like to admit. But I'm admitting it here. I have more than once had to sleep in the trunk of a car. So if that helps anybody with the old how much trauma has this guy lived, well, there's a bit more on there. So this guy basically, after he gets Teddy out, he tries to get him to call his family and say, look, this is what happened. It's over. Can we get, like, I'll surrender myself to the cops if you guys don't hurt my sister. But it's all an act. He does leave the message, but it's just to lure him in because, again, Dwight just wants out of this. He wants it to be over. He thinks he's killed the right guy, you know. But this is when he gets the truth. After he gets the gun taken away from him, and the guy's sitting there, leg asleep, leg broken, getting ready to kill him. And he does, he's like, he talked just a second earlier in the scene about the guy with the gun gets to tell the truth. So now that he has the gun, he's going to tell him the truth. And he says, like, Big Wade is the one who killed your dad and your mom, who was not supposed to die. And they're like, but the way they do it, like, yeah, it was a darn shame that she was there. Like, you know what I mean? But she was still there and you still did it. But he tells him, it's all about how Big Wade found out that Dwight's father was having an affair with Big Wade's wife. He had cancer, so we killed him. But instead of taking the fall for it and dying in prison, one of his sons, Little Wade, took the hit and went to jail for it because he had more life on, he could do the time. The family that, does time together for each other, eventually all dies at the end of the movie. So this whole thing is just their family deciding that his family needed to be wiped out at the time. But it's not Dwight that kills Teddy. It's Ben, the guy played by Devin Ratchray, who shoots him in the head from a distance with a rifle. Shoots him in the head, and he's basically just another killer. And he tells Dwight, like, this is personal, and that's why you're going to fail. So you have to make this impersonal. You have to point the gun, shoot the gun, no fucking speeches. That's how you get out of this. You don't sit there like in a movie and tell them everything about, like, the whole spiel of not how, like, in a mystery, this is how you done it, but just that, this is why we're here because of this speech, and then try to get rid of all these people. And he goes to have his last meal. I love this. It's at like a regular ass, like, kind of family restaurant where he's having like the house wine and the house steak. And he goes to their house. He was told on that, like, that they weren't there because they were hunting. So now he knows that he can get in there. He goes there. He goes around their entire house, gathering up all the weapons, seeing the homemade welcome home sign that they had for Wade that they didn't get to have. Like, again, their family was brought together. The guy had done his time. They were all like, oh my God, all of this is, we're all back together again. And we, Big Wade's done, but we did all, like, we protected our own, and we only had to kill 2 other people to do it. And he finds Big Wade's, like, grave, drinks a lot of water, and then pisses on it. But again, like, when he goes through his own crawl space and looks through his pictures, he finds one of their family albums full of their memories, full of all of their things and all the things that they care about. And again, this isn't just about trauma. It's about families and what they do for each other, to each other. And, it differs from family to family. But it's just like that, how, like, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do for my family, because my family is so fractured that I really just have my sisters. I don't know what I would do for my family, because I can't even fathom something like, I mean, look, with someone with is the kind of imagination that I have, I'm not going to lie. stupidly thought about scenarios of like, if something happened to this, or if some guy that my sister's dating did this or whatever, what would I do? But again, these are all flights of horrible fancy, and reality and fantasy are two different things. And if something were to happen to them, I'm sure that I'd feel this like rage to do something about it. But how would that translate? Would I be Dwight, or would I be like his sister? Or would I be some other animal altogether? You just never know, and you hope you never have to find out. And that's one of the tragedies of these kind of stories, of like, you can see it happening to you, or some, like in the world, because we hear it on the news every day. We just don't get all the details until they put out some like, forensic files about it or some shit like that. But he buries Teddy after looking at the family album. And then he calls their phone. And I thought this was brilliant in the script, at least. I mean, maybe it might be a little too smart for the character. I don't know. But it was good that he calls and leaves a message on their phone. And when they finally come back, they're like charging in, all pissed off, and the phone's ringing, right? And they answer it, and they hear his voice, and he's got the gun on him, and there's 3 of them, and he's got the drop on them all, and he hears himself talking on there, and he starts to stop. He starts to stop himself, and you can tell that he's just going to walk away, or at least attempt to. And then the guy, when he says something about his sisters, when the guy says, "That's why we're going to Pittsburgh, we're going to kill him," and then he just turns, no more questions, shoots the guy, and then shoots him again in the head, shoots the sister, I think, in like the thigh or hand or something. And that's when you turn around, you see Eve Plum sitting, is the mother, or at least the sister. I don't know if she's the mom or not. I think she might be. And we also don't notice that the kid from earlier is behind Dwight with the shotgun. And he starts giving that speech. He starts, there was already the voice on the line, but he starts talking about how your father killed everybody here, And it's crazy watching people that are all like, we're probably about to die. And that rage and anger, and like, what do we do? We're going to fight to our last breath, even if it's like for another second. It's kind of scary to like watch people in that situation. I'm like, it's maybe one of the reasons why I don't like a lot of like horror movies, certain horror movies, is just because that, I don't know. But he gets shot by William, who, it turns out, he figures it out. He sees the age of the kid, and this is something that we don't really, they don't discuss in the movie at all until the end, and they barely discuss it, but just enough where you go, he's done the math. He knows that this kid is basically his stepbrother. He's the love child of his father and their mother. So Eve Plum's character gave birth to him, I think. And he's telling him, like, I want to let this kid go. Let him out of here. He tells him where the car is, tells him where the keys are, tells him to get the hell out of here. Get away from all of this. Be different. Be the one who gets out of this. Get away from all of this awfulness. These people are all going to be gone. There's part of me in you, which really means nothing if you've been indoctrinated by a family for a long time. Not saying it's impossible, but indoctrinated people, seriously. I cannot stress that how much it would have helped me to basically have some deprogramming done, whatever that entails for family members. So at least some intense therapy. But she goes for her Uzi. She shoots her own daughter in the back of the head. We hear the brrr and one shot from the rifle, and that's it. He's dying on the ground. Eve Plum is dead. The daughter's dead. The other brother's dead. William is leaving, and the last thing that uh, Dwight says, is about the keys are in the car. The keys are in the car. And the postcard arrives in the mail at his sister's house after a large storm has knocked down everything. They show little shots of like you can see one of the arrows sticking out of the yard and how all this stuff went down and no one even noticed. And it's just that's the end of this movie, and it makes you go, wow, like how much they can get, how different like Murder Party from Blue Ruin is, and the ability to make effective movies on smaller budgets. And that's, I mean, what I'll say about that again is like not every movie, like even every Marvel movie doesn't need to be these huge bloated things. They can make movies smaller and still look as good. And if you have good scripts, good directors, good writers, and people that are allowed to tell good stories, the budget really doesn't matter. It's like I'll read a comic book that I might not connect with the art, but the writing gets me. Or sometimes the story's so good and the art's so good that maybe the dialogue doesn't matter as much. So that's another thing to take away from movies like this is sometimes less is better. You can get authenticity. And I mean, I guess it's what you're going for. If you're going for huge, big Transformers, Ninja Turtles, Michael Bay explosions, then, you're not gonna do that. But you might try to do it, with a little, and those are CGI fests too. But it's cool to see people do a lot with a little. And that's the story of Blue Ruin, everybody. And I've even talked about this I can't believe how long I talked about this. And I think I've made my points. I think I've talked enough about myself and my own past and why this movie connects with me. And I can't wait to like re-listen to this on edit and see if I'm even able to, if I think that I should even release this as part of it, or do I need to re-record? Because I have a feeling this was a ramble-a-thon fest. But I have a lot of movie memories in my head today that as I'm trying to record, and hopefully some of this came out all right. But now it's time to start talking about the third movie in our series, Green Room. All right, so we finally get near the end of our journey here, where we're finally talking about the movie that I was asked to talk about in the first place, which was 2015's Green Room. I think this might have been the last movie that Anton Yelchin did, but I do know, I'm not for sure on that, but I do know that when they made the DVDs after it came out in like July, the DVDs came out in July, I think, of 2016, they were able to put in a note about Anton, who's also I really liked on Star Trek, the new Star Treks. And I know that like a lot of people don't like the new Star Treks, but I liked him in those movies. And I also really liked him in Alpha Dog as well. I've liked him in a lot of things. And it's a real shame. Again, reality, right? The scariest shit is reality. But we get to Green Room, what I call the Hollywood movie. Okay, there's the full-on independent movie. Then there's the Kickstarter that's still an independent film, but gives them more money to, make how to make it look really good. Because Blue Ruin looks great. I love how Blue Ruin looks. But there was just more to do, and they could develop more, and they could do more. And then with A24 and this movie, this one is like the one that has like lines that are in Hollywood movies. Like at the end, there's I didn't want to ruin the crime scene. I thought we'd leave a new one, things like that. There's a lot of like movie lines. So as far as script goes, there's a lot of authenticity still in this film because of like Saulnier's past as a punk rock band member who knows this world, who knows these kind of people, that occupy that space, which is there are elements to the punk scene that are filled with these kind of neo-Nazis. I don't fully understand it, but he does a lot more than I do. And so the look of this movie feels authentic. The feel of this movie feels authentic. The tone, the acting, all really authentic. The only thing is that now I recognize people in the film outside of Macon Blair, who's been in all of his movies. And that changes things. And then there's also the script that has a more dialogue than Blue Ruin by a mile. But it's a more polished script as far as dialogue goes, and it does follow like, more of a horror movie kind of standard. So it loses it a bit with that. But it's still progression in a director's career. This is where it goes. When you start to get to those new levels, you don't get to, there's going to be people that step in unless you make the deal of a lifetime or you're Quentin Tarantino or something where nobody messes with your scripts, which I don't even know if that's true. But like once you enter the system, whether it's A24 or 20th Century Fox, or or Disney, which is the same thing, right? Warner Brothers, whoever, once the real money gets involved, once there's a budget and they want this amount of money back, right? They want to see returns. That's when the interference comes in. That's where things start to get tinkered with. So as much as like I really like this movie, and it's dark and it has that kind of ending that's like satisfying yet brutal and still like Nazis. I fucking hate these guys, like another movie like that where the thing that sucks about Nazi movies is that that the Nazi, and I'm saying it so many times, is that you want to know why my videos, besides other things, don't get, like played by YouTube's because I say Nazi a lot, but in the way that's like, not pro-Nazi, just not, I'm just using the word, I don't know, a lot, because I talk a lot about that kind of stuff because Nazis are bad. Anyway, it's like I completely lost my train of thought because all I can think about now is Nazis. And since this is the last Saulnier movie I've seen, right? And it's now like I am gonna watch all of the rest of his stuff after I'm done with this. And we'll talk, we'll probably even talk about those things. I'm still treating it like this is a really good, interesting trilogy of watching where a director started and how by the third movie it has become more Hollywood. Now I don't believe this movie made its budget back. It might have by now because it's been out for a really long. It's been a lot longer than I've quit drinking. But so maybe by now it's it hit its price tag. I don't know, but and I'll be given some information, of course, from other like sources and like Wikipedia and other articles. But the idea from this came from him wanting to make a movie set in a green room. He back in 2007 made a short film that dealt with a supernatural situation in a green room where a band like calls up a devil. Which I actually kind of think that's pretty cool, but it didn't. I don't know. I haven't watched that Foo Fighters movie, but it feels like there's devils in that, but I don't know if that's the same kind of thing. Another cool thing about this movie was that the band, the actors in the band actually did play. Now there's like pre-recorded stuff and everything, but they knew what they were doing. It's another like realm of authenticity. And I guess I think Anton and Aaliyah already knew their instruments, which is really cool. So again, bringing that like real punk side to it. But what I like about this is like punk. When you think of punk rock, what do like your general person, right? The person out in the suburbs that is like afraid of Dungeons and Dragons and punk rock music. I mean, I know I'm dating myself here, but insert today's thing, into whatever, the thing that people hate and fear, right? So like when people think about punk rockers, right, they have this like kind of image in their head. But you see these kids in this movie, right? These young adults, and they're not like that. They're just people who play a certain kind of music and have different kinds of layers. I mean, they all have different personalities, and they aren't like all fighters. Like, you know what I mean? There's a passion for the music, but then there's who they are as people. And so there's this like clash of like, they know how to handle like these neo-Nazi skinheads at bars because of the music they play, but in real life, you know, they don't act the way that the actual jackboots act. Which I don't know if there's like a bit of a commentary about that in this movie, if that's trying to say something about it at all, or if I'm just overthinking it. Because I feel like when people have talked to Saulnier about his movies, I feel like he kind of talks back at them like, I think you guys might be giving me too much credit. Now, because this is the movie that actually has a bunch of people I know, you know I'm going to talk about it. So there is Anton Yelchin as Pat. I like that their band name, by the way, is the Ain't Rights. There's so many different. There's several ways you can like interpret that name. Now we know, you know, what happened to him. I mean, the way he died was one of the like just straight like just so. If he had to die, and he had to die then, as messed up as it is, it's like, how do I say this, man? Because there's no good way of like for the family or anybody that would accidentally hear this that had this kind of thing happen to him. But it's just, you always hear like drug overdoses, suicide, tragic misadventure, tragic, you know, accident, mishap. Like what happened to him, just it's rough. And here was so like, I could sit here and, you know, talk about all the ways that guy's career, like where he'd be right now. And it's just like, I don't know. It's moot. Now, Imogen Poots, I've talked about her before on other videos of things she's been in. She's kind of a queen of like independent film and kind of more artsy stuff. She's most recently, I'd say, been in that Open Range series with Josh Brolin. She always plays, she seems to play somebody who's the almost protagonist. Like her characters don't make friends really well, I feel like, with people. Then you got Aaliyah Shawkat, who, I mean, going all the way back to Arrested Development, I can't help it, with Maybe. I haven't really watched her show Search Party, but I've seen her in several films and things over the years, and I'm astounded by her. She's really great. I didn't realize the kind of range she had. Sometimes that just happens. You have Joe Cole, who, another like Joe Cole, he's Peaky Blinders, Skins, Gangs of London. He's an up and comer. He's been in tons of stuff, and I love him on Peaky Blinders. So just another, and he plays Cole, and he's the one that's the actual tough guy. But you look at him, and he's just like kind of just looks like your average suburban kid. And then Callum Turner is Tiger, who he's been in Fantastic Beasts, but like 2 of those movies, a bunch of stuff. Another up and comer. And then, of course, Patrick Stewart. Nobody can get, you know, like the big thing in this, the big like get was all of a sudden Sir Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier. Yeah, see, I didn't pick the one that everybody says first, right? But I picked the one that I adjust in my mind first. Charles Xavier from the X-Men movies. And yes, a little show called Star Trek The Next Generation and a ton of other Star Trek products as, you know, Jean-Luc Picard. And Jean-Luc Picard is suddenly going to be portrayed as the head of a neo-Nazi organization. Not a party, a movement. And that was a big selling point for a lot of people that got in the door. They wanted to see what he would be like. And he delivered. He delivered. The guy is scary. He got to like say some terrible things and be very unlike himself. And a lot of actors love to finally be able to like play the villains, because villains, a good villain doesn't see himself as a villain. They're not like cartoon characters, you know, that are just like, I'm going to blow up the school. You know, like they're people who think they're doing the right thing for the right reasons, even if they know deep down they're scumbags still, but they're still so self-driven, you know, they're going to they can make any excuse for self-preservation and their own survival. And that's what this guy is. You know, he's a little bit like Stacy Keach in American History X, the guy who's selling a whole bunch of young kids a line of bullshit to cover up his own business, using them all as his personal bodyguards. And they're the ones who go to prison. They're the ones who die, and they're the ones who go to jail. Meanwhile, old Darcy here is the guy who sends them to it and just keeps on recruiting these guys to make them think that they're part of something greater when they're just cogs in his fucking heroin, you know, production. All of it in the end is just to cover his own ass. He's got the right amount of people, and he does let the mask slip in this near the end for a second, where the guy looks at him like, wait a minute. But I mean, it's already in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, you've gone too far now with this guy. And then you got Mark Webber, who was in Scott Pilgrim. You got Eric Edelstein, who's been in a ton of stuff. I remember his Drunk History was fantastic. And then Macon Blair back once again as Gabe, the skinhead who starts to come to his senses, seeing how everything went down and seeing through Darcy a lot quicker. Mostly because I would say starting with him kind of abusing him throughout this a little bit, like kind of making it his fault, as if, you know, like the different ways that these characters are people, right? He's part of this like skinhead group. But if you look at him as a person, like same as like Amber, who like, you know, is hanging out with these Nazis. And she's like, I'm not a Nazi. It's just that the people who hurt me weren't white. So she's like hanging out with these people because they sympathize with her plight after of being like something done to her by people other than white people. That's kind of her excuse, though. And you can see that she is different, though, than the rest of them, quicker to violence. And dang. Cal Lennox, who basically plays the kind of I remember in the Thing with Clark and the Huskies. This guy is this movie's Clark, except what if Clark was also a Nazi? And that's Cal Lennox. He plays Clark. So it's like, oh my God, you know what? He's got to be named Clark because of that. If I ever got the chance to ask Jeremy Saulnier any question right now, that would be the question I want most is, did you name Clark after dude from The Thing? And I should know his name because he's a Jeffrey Mazur, who played Clark, I think. Dang, now I'm like, but he was the jerk off, and he'll always be the jerk off in Boogie Nights, who at the beginning of that movie was like mouthing things to Heather Graham, and then later on in the movie shows up as the guy that's gonna screw her in the back of the van and gets. If you haven't seen Boogie Nights by now, get off your ass. Don't complain to me about spoilers for a movie that's like 30 years old. Where he gets the roller skates to the face. Like, never in that whole movie, once you saw that guy's face again, you were like, I hope he gets roller skated over. And you got what you wanted. But he's been in a bunch of stuff. And seeing him play opposite Patrick Stewart in this movie, in this role, as this guy who just loves his dogs and thinks nothing of people. Like, one of the things, and I'm basically, I think that's it for talking about the cast, but the brutal indifference. Was trying to think of things that after talking about the real authentic feel of the other two films, especially the second one, I was trying to find things that would bring up like that authenticity that still had it there, right? Because the way it looks, it looks Hollywood, but it still looks like gritty and dark, and still it's A24, so it's Hollywood adjacent. Let's call it that, right? It's in that really interesting space where, because I really wish this movie had done better. It really should have. And a sea full of Saw movies and other things like that when this movie came out, right? All those just terrible, done to death shit that they've been doing. And Green Room has, it's not the most, it's still not the most original, but it's how it was handled with the Green Room being used as this like siege movie. There's not a lot of siege movies that are also basically horror movies. And I know you can say Assault on Precinct 13 is one, and not the remake. The original is maybe more closer to a horror movie than that one. But there you go, like the difference in like horror and like, you know, authenticity in Hollywood. But for me, I think one of the most realistic parts of this movie was the all the characters, whether they're lying to someone or lying to themselves, they're all like, there's still like this kind of under the surface wish that they were all getting out of this, that none of this had happened, and that we're all going to fool ourselves that there's some way out of this, even though some characters will say that and straight up be lying and have other intent. There's, again, even like with Patrick Stewart, at least earlier on in the film, there is this, like, as evil as he is, he's not straight out wanting to do this. This is last resort. But once they go to where it's just that's it, this is over, this is what we're doing, the brutal indifference and the way that he uses the red laces, the people who believe in it, the people who will just stab and kill and murder the indoctrinated that just give over to this guy's will, and how they actually react in the siege situations where you're trying to negotiate, but you know that on the other side of this door are all these people with guns and dogs and knives, and your car, you don't know how you're going to get there. You don't know how many people are out there. It's probably a fucking army, right? In your head, it could be 50, 100 people out there waiting to just gun you down. And you're supposed to somehow either stay in that room until somehow help arrives, or they just come for you, or you're going to have to go out there guns a-blazing. And the way that they handle all of that, like, forget all the Hollywood lines and dialogue and stuff like that. And I did like the story that he starts to tell that gets finished at the end. And I almost wish it had stayed unfinished, especially because I kind of think that the last line, is funny as it is. Well, no, that last line comes up with something else, but I almost wish that he didn't tell Imogen Poots the last part of that story about the paintball experience with the ex-Marines. And he doesn't say what happens to this guy who goes out and charges the Marines. I think that when he does tell her that later, and it's like he took them all out and he didn't stop until they were all gone. And I thought to myself, no, I really would have left that out. I think it's better to like let the audience kind of drive themselves crazy and go, what happened? What happened? And it's kind of like, well, you've already seen what would have happened. Another problem I guess I'd have with this movie is I feel like they went back. They kept going back to the green room too many times to find something else, because, do a little push and lose some people, do a little push and lose another person, do a little, like, I felt like it should have been twice at most. That third time, I felt like they should have done everything that they did in the third time and the second time. And that going back, even like more like, it's almost like they went back a fourth time almost, and dealt with those people. I just feel like there should have been just one less time going back to the green room. But from the instant that they go in the back, and yeah, I love the part where they fuck with the them and the song and everything else, and you think, oh shit, is this going to be what kicks off the violence? But that's not what happens. The subversion is they just happen to walk in at the wrong time, one of them does, and sees the wrong thing. And I think that it's so hilarious that this movie's like body count hinges on the fact that some shithead neo-Nazi metal band singer is so tweaked out, but he's part of the movement and he's one of the faces of popular movement, right? Like we don't have too many people that we can put out there, and he just makes records and people listen, and this is how we spread our movement. That he stabs someone in the head because just like in Blue Ruin, a character finds out that he was betrayed by someone he liked or loved or was with, and that they were going to run away, like they were having something with somebody else. And so in a moment, he stabs her and kills her, and that's when Anton's Pat walks in, sees the body, and he tries to go, and everything goes from there. This could have been de-escalated quickly. This could have been, but a series of choices gets made where they're not going anywhere, and all of their reactions are believable. But once it's like clear that the cops aren't coming, the way that they handle the cops, they even get their own people to stab each other to fake out all this stuff. Once you've done all those things, there's really, to the people out that aren't in that green room, they're already dead inside that room, and they just haven't died yet. And the people in that room have to think about how there's probably a bunch of people out there plotting your own death. And to know that you're probably right and you're not out of your mind in this situation, to think that would drive you crazy. And then it's the whole negotiating for this, that, and the other. Him, Pat, almost getting his hand lopped off. The fact that the big guy gets taken down by the one guy because he knows those moves, like all of a sudden that reality of like that guy never realizing he'd have, be on the floor getting choked out by somebody. He thought he was the biggest, scariest guy in the room. It turns out the biggest, scariest guy in the room hardly said a word when he did anything. And you could say that up until Amber's character says they're good, like when she sees the red laces and she goes, they're going to kill us all. Like they grabbed the gun. That was like the moment though, where it finally set in that it's like, they're all going to die if they don't get out of there. And how do you face up to that? Like they're smashing the wall, smashing the floor. And even when they smash through the floor and they find out that this whole thing is about a heroin operation, they can't even get out of that lab. I mean, if I were them, and there we go. If I were them, I don't know, man. I'd have destroyed his shit. I'd be like, hey, go tell him that we're going to light his heroin on fire. And at least we'll all go out stoned, man. But, dang it. And another realistic thing is the whole situation that how they found themselves there, right? They're this band that's almost ready to call it quits on their tour. They don't hardly have any gas. They fell asleep at the wheel. They almost crashed. And then they find out that this guy who sets up this gig, who sets up their interview, that's looking for his own clout, doesn't have, he already had his license pulled from setting up gigs at places. And in an effort to be nice and set up these people with a gig, he sets them up with these people. He's the one who puts them out there. But how would he, like he warns them. He knows about these people, but there's been, how many times have people gone to these shows and nothing happened? And the one time that they're there with some tweaked out asshole who does something, everybody else pays. And once they do commit to leaving, and it just, I like that again, they didn't, as fucking scary as it is to watch, like the dog ripping out somebody's throat or the guy jumping out the window and immediately being stabbed to death. It's just the idea that such a small thing leads to all of this, where you start your day off siphoning gas, going to a gig, playing a gig, and then just walking out like normal that you would at any other show. And now you're fighting for your life and you're dropping like flies. And in the end, what is it for? What are any of them doing any of this for? They start the bad guys. Some of the bad guys start to find out. Gabe, played by Macon Blair, didn't put Daniel on the door, which was normal, that character Daniel, but he didn't put him on the door because of Emily. Why didn't he put it on the door? Because of Emily. Because he knew about him and Emily being a thing, and he didn't want that to be seen by the singer who kills her later, even though he knew already. So when Dan finds out, then you have that first crack, right, of the guy who was going to run away with her, except now he's found out already too. So this guy who comes in and you think, oh, he's going to be our guy, he's going to be our way out, he's immediately killed with a shotgun blast to the head. Then he immediately killed that guy. And it's just this like tit for tat thing for a while. And it does become Hollywood in here, where it's like the bad guys are all about, just about feeling like, okay, we've set everything up and we're going to start staging the crime down the road while you two guys go take care of the rest. You know what I mean? Like, this is where it starts to get a little bit inauthentic, where in real life, they'd have just sent a bunch of dudes in there with guns. Just go. If it doesn't matter how many bullets anymore, if it doesn't matter how it looks, then you just go, okay, we're all going in there, blam, 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 blam. You don't leave it up to just a couple of people to screw it up. That's how things happen in a movie. I was watching something today where I was taking notes, and the guy does something that clearly so he can get into a situation where he can escape the situation. And how obvious that all seems, and like somebody should have seen that coming. Anyway, so Aaliyah ends up getting killed by, they make another run out the door. She gets killed by a dog. And now it's Amber and Pat trying to make their final stand. They all leave. I do like the use of feedback on the dogs. I thought that was interesting to like try to remove them as a threat for the most part. And it works. And you just go, thank God, except this guy's got like dogs out the ass. And they have their like, this is again the Hollywood kind of moment where they do the things that they didn't do in like a Blue Ruin. They wouldn't do it in a Blue Ruin because these people are actually acting like movie characters and not real, like characters that you feel are more real in these instances, where they're doing the cool, I'm right behind the corner, oh yeah, I'm gonna trick this guy like this, and it works. Things in the other in Blue Ruin don't work. So again, just seeing the difference in like scripts from one movie to the next because of X, Y, or Z. And it's not that it's not entertaining, by the way, either. Getting the drop on these guys, you can do anything to a Nazi, and not feel bad about it. That's the great thing about Nazis. The only great thing about Nazis is that you can do anything to them. Like, you can blow them up, you can shoot them out of a cannon, you can drop them down in a bottomless pit, you can vote for them for president. Ooh. Anyway. But yes, I love how they trick the guys at the end, but they still take their lumps, and they come out, and Macon is there, Gabe's there, saying, I never wanted to do any of this, I just didn't want to go to jail. So they lead him out by gunpoint, and they start taking him down the road to find where everybody else is left. And they talk about calling the police, but it's one of those movies where you never see the cops after the initial thing. Like, you don't know what's going to happen to these characters after the fact. Do they just kind of slip off into the night, or and try to restart their lives? Or is this just the beginning of like a never ending hell where they have to explain what they were doing out, like how they got involved with some underground heroin dealers and Nazi movements, and why all their friends are dead, and, explaining how some of these people died, blah, blah, blah. But it's still very satisfying. And that's the thing, is Murder Party, I left feeling pretty satisfied. about like how it ended. Blue Ruin, I don't think you're supposed to feel satisfied with. I think it's supposed to just, at least for me, I wasn't satisfied, but not in a bad way. It left me like just thinking more about it. And it didn't have an, I guess satisfied means in this context, like it didn't give me the Hollywood ending. People made choices, and then those choices had logical, realistic consequences. Murder Party just had a bunch of, it had some logical consequences, but it was more absurdist and cartoony. And in this one, it had logical effects to doing things. Like if you walk up to it, if somebody sticks a dog on you that's trying to do it, he's going to rip your throat out. But in this, it was like, it was cleaner. Like as many people died, there was an ending where good triumphed, like good stops evil. For at least, the story in this story, the revenge was gotten. The people who did bad things to these characters get their comeuppance. Outside of Gabe, who does at least say we need the police. So like he, like he might be involved in this. I don't know. But this movie doesn't have a bunch of like heroes. It has people that survive something or don't survive something. Because in the end, they could wait for the police. But Amber's having none of that, and she just blasts Clark like nothing. I actually thought Anton, I remembered this wrong. I thought that Pat, played by Anton, shoots the kid across from the car, like when he's like looking at him through the other side of the car. I thought he just shot him there. But instead, they don't do it until like when they lead everybody down after she shoots Clark. And then it's just bam, bam, bam. Patrick Stewart goes down too. And like he just starts to just like, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. Like I'm just going to go, even though he like starts to pull out his gun and everything. And there is like the Hollywoodish speech from Anton, not speech, but the lines here are more like something that I would see more in a Hollywood movie. Now, again, none of this is bad. It's just when I'm comparing all three of his movie styles and scripts, these are the things that stand out that are different. And I'm sure that at the time that I saw this movie, I wasn't thinking about it on the same level as I'm trying to talk about a director's first three movies. I probably talked about it in a lot more like, oh, that was great when he just blasts that guy and he says, ha, ha, ha. Once you start looking into things more deeper, you can find like those scenes have more meaning than just, and then the squib goes off in his head and he dies. But the last line of this movie is them he goes, I know what it is, my desert island band. And they had all said their desert island bands. And I like, again, proving that they sit there and they talk about punk and their punk influences and punk songs they like, and then they go, what's their desert island bands after the fact? Because the one guy's like Misfits or whatever. And Sam, or Aaliyah says Simon and Garfunkel. And immediately I think it's Cole says Prince. Tiger still says the Misfits. And then Amber goes Madonna and Slayer. And so at the end of the movie, Anton, who couldn't, Pat's character played by Anton, he finally starts to say what it is. And she goes, tell somebody who gives a shit. And that's how the movie ends. And it's one of those movies that every time I watch it now, I enjoy it more now after the fact. Because it was distracting, like, for me to watch these three movies before. The first time I did this, because this is the second time I've made a pass to try to like get these videos done. And I watched all three movies. And I remember the last time thinking, man, Green Room is great, but it's filled with all these actors that are coming up. But again, that's what this, what any director would want to do and make progress. So I had, in my own thinking about it, I had to go, okay, well, what would you do if you were making Hollywood movies? How would you want to progress? Do you want to just stick to your like independent roots the whole time and not make any money and not have, you know, like, and yeah, sure, you might be able to get Christopher Walken in your movie, but like 6 people saw it. So like the goal is to be successful. And so you would have to start putting in people, and then you realize that then you start to have to make these deals. And the only way to really get creative freedom, if you want to call it that, if you can, like, I don't know how easy it is for Spielberg to just say, I'm going to make this movie and make this movie, right? But there's only one Spielberg. There's only one, you know, Scorsese. There's only one Nolan. There's only one, you know, Cameron. And not even all of those people probably can just guarantee and automatically say, this is the movie I'm going to make and it's going to be this way. Not all of them get to just do that either. But this is the progress. So I have to go, yeah, as a whole still, even though some of these things are different and feel a little less authentic by the time you get to this movie, it's still a really damn good movie. And it sucks that it didn't do as well as I think it should have. Again, I think it's one of those movies that becomes more popular as it goes along. I think this movie, especially nowadays, if more people should be watching Green Room, maybe even just to get pumped up. I don't know. But to fight the power. But I don't know what the other Jeremy Saulnier stuff is like. But if it's anything like the progression here, I can't wait to see how his style and scripts and tones and stories have evolved since then. And that's why, I mean, now that I'm done with this, I can't wait to finally allow myself to watch his other films. And I know that this was like this massive, huge blathering on kind of thing. And I did make this special for one person. So if this person likes it, then that's all that matters to me. And I can't wait to try to see what I can fix in editing. So if you've made it this far, because this is the shortest one, I have not talked about this one as long, and it's the most fresh in my mind. But again, I think it's because of the Hollywood elements, and I've kind of gone over a lot of the reasons why I like Jeremy Saulnier movies. There's a little less to say by the time I got here. But it doesn't take away from the fact that all these movies, I think, on their own level, depending on and the way that you watch them and the way that you expect what are you getting from this? Like Murder Party, you're getting a silly, absurdist first film from an aspiring director with a lot of promise and a lot of crazy ideas and an authentic style that you can't wait to see what they do next. And then when you get to Blue Ruin and you go, holy shit, that was brutal, but brutal in a way of like there were a lot of Coen Brothers type of feels from that movie that I got. And the same kind of follows here, except this kind of got more along the lines of like the vibes of a lot of movies that were coming out in that time period with this kind of tone. But it was one of those movies that was able to shine and stand out from those movies from the way it was handled, and not just because it had Patrick Stewart in it. And people that went to go see this movie or saw it on video or streaming really got a punch in the face. This is a brutal movie, but like it's all, everything that happens because of choices, and not just because, would be a cool part to where blah, blah, blah happens. But there's times in this movie, like I said, where because of the Hollywoodizing of it, even again, if it wasn't full on, right, it didn't feel like it had that many fingerprints on it, but I'm sure it still had some. And here I am now at the point where I'm like, how do I get out of this video? Because, well, geez, dude, you've talked so long and so much. How do you, how could you not just, talk forever? Just keep on talking. Well, I don't think anybody that's made it this far is probably just like, please, for the love of God, shut him up. But I've done it. I've done the massive Jeremy Saulnier retrospective video. And again, I can't wait to fix it in editing. So to my buddy Darren, I hope that this makes up for a lot. Or maybe, how about we call this even? All right, if this was a roll in D&D, we'd say that, like, if I was rolling at advantage, it would now just be at a straight roll instead of at disadvantage. So any advantage I had is now just, we're on even playing field. I don't know what I'm talking about. I just feel like, because I owe him a lot, I hope this makes up for some of the nonsense that we've been through over the years. So if you like this long giant video that you probably only watched in pieces, yeah, who has like 3 hours? This is definitely a chop up, like stuck in traffic on the way home on a really bad night. Really bad night. You just like, go, fuck it, I'm gonna listen to this whole goddamn thing. If you liked any of this, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the button for all the notifications, share with all the people who like these movies. This is Rob from Smirking Gun saying, be good to each other, be a lot better than some of the people are in these films. Try to be, at least. I know I'm going to try to be. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye.